Good September morning, everybody. It reminds me of that song. Do you remember the general membership meeting in September? I am Romeo Arrieta, your Marin Realtors CEO, and I want to thank you for being here at our September general membership meeting, where we'll have an update from the Department of Real Estate, Commissioner Sundquist. I've got my coffee ready. I hope you have your coffee ready so we can have some coffee with the commish. I have a little bit of quick housekeeping items. Like most of our webinar general membership meetings, it's a webinar. We ask that you please use the Q&A feature. If you have any questions for the speaker, we did dedicate some time at the end for Q&A. So don't wait until the end to ask your questions. Get them in, and we'll try to address them as much as possible. In a little while, you'll be hearing from Marin Realtors President Joe Burns, who will lead us through today's meeting. But before we turn it over to President Joe, I'd like to thank our general sponsor, Homer Razzulli of Mutual of Omaha Reverse Mortgage. So let me turn it over to Homer.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's beautiful September, and the time is just flying out the door. I don't know how we became to September. It's just amazing. I'm Homer Razzulli. I'm a reverse mortgage specialist with Mutual of Omaha. It's been honored that I've been sponsoring your programs and lunch and learns and a lot of great information to give out about reverse mortgages, especially now that I see so many retirees and seniors really need our help. It needs your help as a trusted advisor. It needs everybody to just pay attention to our senior clients and senior neighbors and family members, because their income is fixed. And if they have a house and they have equity in their house, they can live more comfortable. Or if they are downsizing, right-sizing, they want to buy a house, they can use the reverse mortgage for purchase. You can sell their existing home and buy a new house with the reverse mortgage, which is an FHA insured product. It's great for homeowners 62 and older to be able to use the reverse mortgage for purchase with one-time down payment and no more monthly mortgage payment. And if, let's say, someone is selling their home for $1 million, they want to buy a house for $800,000, then they, instead of paying all the $800,000 to buy a new house, they can pay half of that and get a reverse mortgage and then create a great investments and savings for themselves so they can live more comfortable. There is 5 ways to secure retirement with the reverse mortgages. I'm just going to read them because our time doesn't allow that, but I love to meet with each one of you and go over this information because I think it's very critical for all of us to know other options that we can help our senior clients. The first way is alleviate stress on portfolio by eliminating principal and interest payment, provide buffer assets to mitigate adverse sequence of return, purchase retirement home without monthly mortgage payments and portfolio invasion, reduce portfolio draws without sacrificing spending, hedge against inflation, property deflation, and unexpected expenses. And we also can do refinance with, if whoever has a reverse mortgages, we can refinance after 1 year if we can do better for them. We also have a new jumbo product, which is a second. If anybody wants to get a second loan and keep their first loan, which is with 2 or 3% interest rate, they don't want to get rid of that, we do have a second based on how much equity they have. So please give me a call with any question that you may have. I'll be more than happy to do presentation, to do one-on-one. Looking forward to seeing you all in person. Thank you. Thank you, Marin Realtors, and I appreciate the opportunity to be with you guys.
And I want to thank Homa so much for that for that presentation and your sponsorship and your support to Marin Realtors over the years. Many programs that we wouldn't be able to bring to you if it weren't for the help from our sponsors. So thank you so much, Homa. Now, if you have been to a general membership meeting, you know that this is my favorite part of the meeting, where I get to hand it over and introduce your president for 2024, Joe Burns.
Well, thank you, Romeo, and thank you, Homa. What a privilege to be here in front of you today as your president, and my last general membership meeting as your president. It's been a great year so far, and we still have wonderful things ahead of us for 2024. I do want to harken back to our first general membership meeting in January, which was also an installation, and I said some words that change is challenging. And I had no idea what I was saying at the time, other than it's been a challenging year. But frankly, a little less challenging than the circumstances would have presented, because of the membership and because of the professionalism of our agents and members that I've witnessed when I'm out in the field at broker tour or open houses or office meetings. I really appreciate you, members, for all you've done to make this year less challenging, given the changes that we've endured and will continue. So thank you for that. We have some updates that I want to provide. You know, it's a webinar when you sit down and realize the person that lives next door to you is pouring cement. So you might hear some trucks beeping. Trust me, it's the trucks and not me backing up, but sorry if there's any noise while I do this. We've had a great year, and I want to thank particularly the board of directors for your service, all of our committees for all that you've done this year, as well as your president-elect, Anna Frost. This is the time of year where Anna is starting to prepare for her next year and her presidency. And I'm excited that we have these last few months of that preparation. A couple things going on at the association I want to bring to your attention. You might have heard this. We're bringing back the Bocce event. It'll be on September 20th. You know, this is the event that was made so popular by the Women's Council of Realtors. It is sold out, but if you reach Aaron, you might be given a spectator touristy ticket. You have to reach out to Aaron to find out what that means. But the Bocce tournament is September 20th at Albert Park in San Rafael, and it's a fantastic event. We have a school tour coming up as well. San Marin High School, that's two-time state champion football San Marin High School, on October 3rd. We'll be hearing from the superintendent, Tracy Smith, as well as the principal, Andy Boone. The bell rings at 9:30. Don't be tardy. Close your locker, be in class by 9:30. That's on October 3rd at San Marin. Please sign up. We hope you can also join us for a spooky and sponsored Halloween happy hour on Thursday, October 24th. This is a YPN happy hour. It will be held at Ranch Water. They're doing it on the 24th so you can practice your costume. So feel free to wear a costume if you'd like. You don't have to wear a costume. You don't even have to be young. You should be professional, and this is a networking opportunity. So you want those two things ready to go, but a fantastic opportunity, and our YPN continues to bring us these opportunities to get together. We also hope you'll be around in October on the 29th for our third and final speaker series of the year. We'll let you know who that's going to be shortly, because I don't want to draw attention away from our fabulous speaker today, who I'm going to introduce in just a second. And if you saw my last column, you know how proud I am of what realtors do in our community. From all the volunteering to putting our money where our volunteerism goes. And I'm speaking specifically about Ritter Center, Homeward Bound, Next Gen Scholars, One TAM, all the places that we support as realtors. You support those as realtors. And I encourage you to let your clients know, let the public know, let people in our communities know what you do for a living and how you provide back to the community. It's very valuable. We've set up this QR code so you can get more information on our charitable giving, as well as this great little token image that you can put on your social media or your marketing campaigns to let people know. I mentioned before, we've had, I would thank our board of directors, and we have a transition coming up for 2025. So you will soon be seeing the notice of elections coming out. We'll have a slate in front of you by October, consideration for the 2025 leadership. And finally, don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have any ideas on becoming a future leader in MAR. I can tell you, absolutely, this has been a fantastic opportunity for me to be involved in my industry, to work with so many great agents. And I think everybody should have the opportunity to do this at some point in their career. So if it's your time, give me a call. Let me know. I'll be happy to introduce you to the process. So that's about all I have on general membership business. We get to get that out of the way now and focus on the event of the day, which is our guest speaker. And I am absolutely pleasure to introduce today's speaker, who is DRE Commissioner Chika Sundquist. Through this process, I've got to speak with Chika about different things in our industry and preparing for this meeting. And we are lucky to have her as a commissioner. She's collaborative, she's credible, she's on top of it. And I think we're gonna hear some good things coming from the DRE. A little bit about Chika. She was appointed Commissioner of California Department of Real Estate by Governor Newsom on November 28th, 2023. And she assumed office on January 3rd, 2024. So how's your year going?
So far, so good.
Chika began her career in the DRE in 2006 as Deputy Commissioner in Sacramento Enforcement Office, where she investigated complaints against licensees and unlicensed persons and performed background investigations on licensed applicants. In 2008, Chika transferred to DRE's Mortgage Loan Activities Unit, where she was involved in implementation of the Secure and Fair Enforcement for Mortgage Licensing, SAFE Act, and the licensing of mortgage loan originators. In 2015, she was promoted to Supervising Special Investigator over the Mortgage Loan Activities Unit. Since 2020, Chika has served as the Assistant Commissioner of Enforcement at DRE. She has been responsible for the overall management and operations of the Enforcement Division. Prior to joining DRE, Chika sold residential real estate as a real estate salesperson. She knows what we do. She currently holds a broker's license on government service. Chika holds a Bachelor's of Science degree in Languages and Linguistics from Georgetown University and an Associate of Arts degree in Administration of Justice from Sacramento City College. There's many, many more pages, but I'm going to keep this short and just introduce Commissioner Sundquist to you now. Thank you for being here. It's a nice crowd, so good luck.
Thank you so much, Joe. I'm really excited to be here, honored to be part of your meeting today. And I have with me Tricia Parkhurst. She is our newest Chief of Enforcement. I've worked with Tricia since I started at DRE. She is incredibly smart and passionate about our mission of consumer protection. She's going to be helping me out when I flub or helping me with questions. And Joe, I remembered my license number. It's not as impressive as yours. It's not 009, but mine starts with a 014. So I think I can be a little bit proud of that fact. Having that license from, I think, about 20 years ago at this point. But at any rate, thank you so much for allowing me to be here, provide a few updates, and then, as Joe mentioned, answer some questions. As Romeo mentioned, I think answer a few questions at the end. I did get some in advance as well, so hopefully I will be able to incorporate those throughout the presentation. Next slide, please. So just a little bit of background about what DRE does, because we often get confused with, trade organizations and your efforts. But just to emphasize kind of that we are a state department, we are a regulatory agency. We enforce the real estate law, the Subdivided Lands Act, Vacation Ownership and Timeshare Act. Um, Consumer protection is our highest priority, as is yours. You want to help your clients, help consumers, and their largest transaction of their lives, financially, most of the time. We issue your real estate license. Don't forget to renew every 4 years. And then related to subdivisions and timeshares, when a developer wants to sell a subdivision or a timeshare to a consumer in California, they have to come apply to us. We review their information and application, then we issue a public report that they use to share with consumers so consumers know what they're getting into when they're buying a subdivision or a timeshare. Next slide, please. Thank you. Just by the numbers, our first licensing authorities was in 1917. If you ever hear the commissioner from Utah speak, I believe they like to say that they were first, but we like to say that we were first here in California. Our budget for 24-25 fiscal year is about 67 million. We have 370 employees, and our offices are located throughout the state to provide, obviously, the best service that we can, not only to our licensees, but to consumers. And then we've got 5 exam centers as well to provide as much access as we can when we're to the real estate exam. Next slide. Thank you. In terms of our finances for last fiscal year, which just ended at the end of June, as you can see here, sorry, it's kind of hard for me to see, but you'll get the slides later. But at any rate, most of our revenues come from license fees. As you can see, that takes up most of the pie on the left-hand side of the chart, or on the left-hand side of the screen there. And then subdivision fees, and then we've got some other fees that come in. But then on the right-hand side, as you can see, most of our expenses go to staffing DRE, staffing us with licensing and exam staff, with investigators and auditors, support staff, HR, all of those people that really help to make DRE not only a great place to work, but function and provide our services and then meet our mission of consumer protection. Sorry, I'll get to this slide real quick. I wanted to remember to mention that we did have a fee increase that was effective July 1st of this year that affected a lot of our fees, not all of them, but a lot of them. If you weren't aware, you're gonna know once you come to renew to us with us in a few months or in a few years, because you're gonna notice that your salesperson or broker renewal fee has gone up. For salespersons, renewal for the 4-year license is at $350 now, and for brokers, the renewal for the 4-year license is $450. So if you want more information about our updated fees, which we hadn't updated statutorily since 1997. So we like to think we've been doing a good job with fees for a long time until we absolutely had to raise them. But you can find more information on our website at dre.ca.gov/fees. So easy to get to. Okay, sorry. Thank you. Next slide. In terms of our licensing population, over the last 10 years, it's been pretty steadily increasing, as you can see on the slide here. During COVID, thank you, Craig. During COVID, we had a huge increase. As you know, real estate just boomed during COVID. And then steadily over the last few years, we've been losing about 1,000 licensees per year. So right now, we're holding steady at about 433,000. About 28% of that is brokers, 72% is salespersons, and that matches historical rates of broker versus salesperson ratios. Next slide, please. Exams administered. Okay, so you got to kind of ignore COVID numbers when it comes to the exams, because as you all know, things shut down in 2020. And so we couldn't offer as many exams as we wanted, but then we were able to offer more exams than we on average do, because we opened up access to weekends and night times and such. So those numbers are kind of skewed. But as you can see, overall, we're on point with about 46,000, in the high 40,000 exams that we've administered. We are constantly monitoring the number of new examinees, new licensees coming into the industry, especially since, the market's been a little bit different. It's been shifting a little bit. Broker practices are changing with some of the buyer representation practices changing, MLS changes. So we're starting to see a slow decline in the number of exam applications that we're getting. So we're just monitoring those. And that's just been happening over the last maybe 8 months or so. So we're just kind of keeping an eye out for that. Next slide, please. So same thing with licenses issued. You can see that this chart pretty much exactly matches our exams administered. So we're starting to see that slight decline in people coming into the licensing profession, the real estate profession. So we're just monitoring those numbers, seeing how it affects the industry, seeing how it affects us. But for right now, we're still pretty steady on average for our historical averages over the last 10 years. Perfect, thank you. However, once people are in the industry, they like to stay there. So, you all know you worked hard to get your license. I remember I worked hard to get my sales license and then my broker's license. So I want to keep it. Same with you all. So on average, our brokers tend to keep their license at about a 91% rate. Salespersons in the 70 to 80, high 70 to 80% range. So most of our licensees, once they come into licensure, they tend to stay licensed. Perfect, thank you. We got a question about continuing education requirements and what's changed there. So a few years ago, there was a bill, excuse me, SB 263, that, well, as you can recall, there were some issues surrounding a lot of the appraisal kind of industry and seeing biases in appraisals, people not realizing their implicit biases were affecting how they were interacting with consumers. And so the legislature wanted to make sure that we were increasing our awareness of our implicit biases, our explicit biases, and making sure that industry members were well educated in what's allowable, what's fair housing, why is it important, how do you treat your clients fairly. So the continuing education course requirements has changed over the last few years. So it's really cool. There's an interactive participatory component now where you have to pretend to be the consumer and pretend to be the salesperson in a transaction. There's that, implicit, explicit bias kind of testing that you have to go through. So it's a really important update to continuing education to, again, make sure that our licensees are aware of their own biases and how that might affect their interaction with their clients, with your clients. Perfect. So I'll get to surprise visits. I know that's probably kind of the core question as to why this slide is up here, but I'll bring your attention to the right-hand side slide. Most of our visits to see brokers are investigative, meaning we get a complaint and we need to investigate the complaint. We need to look into what happened, get all the facts, and then find out if there was an opportunity to educate the broker or the salesperson on what happened, how to improve that practice in accordance with the real estate law, how to come into compliance, or resolve that complaint. Or if it needs to go further down the line into some sort of disciplinary action, then we'll pursue that. Then on the other side of things, we have our routine or proactive audits where we just want to see you. We have, as I pointed out, 370 odd positions at DRE, but very few of those are actual investigators, and even fewer of those are our auditors that go out. So I say our enforcement team has maybe 50 investigators that go out in the field. We have about 30 auditors that go out in the field, compared to the 433,000 licensees that we have. So when we can, we try to go out and see you on a routine basis, proactive basis. I'm old enough that when I started, we were at DRE, we were picking names out of a phone book. But now, we just kind of pick names from the internet, or maybe it's someone we need to follow up on. We don't do, I won't call them surprise visits, because we really just go out to see you. Or if we are surprising you, it's maybe just because we're out in the field already going out to another audit or a broker visit, and we just want to hand out a business card. The only real surprise visits that I will say that we do, we call them shops. And we do go out and shop unlicensed activity. So if we are alerted to somebody that doesn't have a license and is performing activities that require a license, we will pretend to be a consumer and shop them to see if they're reaching that level of licensed activity without that license. So I think that's kind of where our surprise visits come into play, is with unlicensed activity. Next slide, please. Thank you. In terms of transaction complaints that we get right now and over the last few years, things have been good. We haven't been seeing one major type of scam like we saw during the mortgage fraud days or during the loan modification and foreclosure rescue fraud days. So right now, our complaints range from, hey, my agent didn't tell me this terrible thing about this property that I never would have bought had I known that. Or, my agent gave me these forms and asked me to sign them, but I didn't quite understand what I was signing and they didn't explain it to me. So I didn't understand this disclosure and I wouldn't have moved forward with this transaction had I really understood what the practical application of that was. We also see discrimination complaints. Hey, my offer wasn't submitted because of this protected characteristic. We also see outright fraud. My property was stolen from me. My agent signed my name for me on this document. Yes, those kinds of things happen. I know you don't do these things, but just be aware these things happen. We do receive complaints on them. And then negligence, again, you worked hard to get a license, but it's important that you follow the law. And if you don't, if you don't follow the law and you're negligent in a transaction, then we do have the authority to put you on notice about a violation or pursue disciplinary action based on how egregious the issue was or the level of consumer harm. Next slide, please. Perfect. Thank you. So this goes back a little bit to what I was talking about with unlicensed activity. There are a lot of different ways that we view unlicensed activity, or how we, the things that we see as unlicensed activity. The primary one that we get complaints on, or that we see ourselves, is the person that is completely unlicensed, that is trying to take money from a California consumer to do something that they're not allowed to do because they don't have the license that they earned like you all did. So I would ask you all, if you see anything like that, please report it to us. Because like I said, we have 80 odd field staff compared to you 433,000 licensees who see everything that's happening in your community related to real estate. So if you see unlicensed activity, please report it to us. We have an online complaint form. It's easy to get to. It's easy to fill out. You can file complaints anonymously. It's not ideal, but you can file complaints anonymously. And please alert us to that unlicensed activity. We did get a question in advance on transaction coordinators. So we don't like to kind of categorize what unlicensed activity is allowable in terms of, titles or, a job classification. So, kind of my approach to unlicensed activity is, if you have an employee, if you're a broker, you have an employee, you have a really important job of making sure they don't cross that line. What we tried to do is we put out a guideline. It's on our website. Just search guidelines for unlicensed assistants, or, unlicensed assistant guidelines. You should find it. It'll come up. But it's a multi-page list of kind of the things that an unlicensed employee of a broker can do. sit at an open house and hand out flyers, or answer a phone and schedule an appointment, those kinds of things that we've laid out that don't cross over into soliciting a consumer or negotiating a transaction. So if you have, questions about how DRE views unlicensed activity that's lawful as an employee of a broker, then please check out those guidelines for unlicensed assistants. Okay, sorry, next slide. Here's some enforcement statistics. I won't go into all the details of this, but as you can see, we get probably about 5,000 to 5,500 complaints a year on average. And then when you boil it down to how many we investigate, it's a smaller percentage, clearly, and then even smaller are the number of complaints that were referred for disciplinary action. So most of the complaints that we investigate don't have an outcome of a major finding. Because then if you look at the right-hand side of the slide, last fiscal year, we revoked or restricted only 332 licenses. So out of the number of complaints, which doesn't even count the proactive visits that we do, we take a small number of disciplinary actions. So I think you guys can hold your heads high in that you are professionals and that you're engaging in lawful, fair behavior with your clients, because we don't, as you see, take a lot of disciplinary actions in the end, even if we do get a complaint. Next slide, please. Best practices, just to touch upon some best practices that I like to share. As I asked you again, or as I asked you earlier to report to us unlicensed activity, when you're in the middle of a transaction, I would ask you to check the license of the person on the other side. If you're the buyer's agent, check out the seller's agent, check the broker, check the salesperson or the broker associate that you're working with. Make sure they're licensed, because you don't want to jeopardize your transaction and your client by working with somebody that is unlicensed, because that means that, they're potentially not following the real estate law. They don't know how to treat their clients. You're getting involved in a transaction where somebody's getting paid to do unlicensed work, which is a huge no-no. They're not covered by, your errors and omissions insurance, not required by DRE, but I know a lot of brokerages have. So just, kind of please check, just once in a while, check to make sure that you're working with somebody that's licensed. Now, on the flip side, sorry, I know I talked too much. Sorry, Greg. On the flip side, I would ask you to regularly check your licenses. Make sure your name's correct. Make sure you're affiliated with your correct broker if you're a salesperson or broker associate. If you're a broker, make sure all your fictitious business names that you're using are listed. Make sure your office locations are all listed. And then in addition to that, make sure you're doing internet checks of yourself, because this doesn't happen frequently, but we do occasionally get a complaint from a licensee who says, DRE, someone has stolen my license identity and is scamming consumers. They have a website up that's not mine. They have a Facebook page. They have Instagram. It's not mine. And they are stealing consumers' money. And now those consumers are coming to me because the scammers fled, but all they can find is my legitimate information, and I'm getting sued. So that has been the very scary story that we've been hearing on occasion. So again, I just ask you all to please make sure, check your license, do web searches of yourself to make sure that only the information you've put out is out on the internet. Okay, sorry, now next slide, please. Okay, another important point is to remember that you are an agent. The real estate law centers around agency, meaning the broker is the agent of the client. And then clearly the salespersons and broker associates that work for that broker have also that same agency requirement to provide their fiduciary duties to clients. We find that, sometimes agents salespersons and broker associates are running the show and not the broker. We call those rent-a-brokers. That's a no-no, because the real estate law is fundamentally based in agency surrounding the broker. If we have a a complaint, we'll go to the broker. If we want to do a visit, we'll go to the broker. So just remember, the broker is fundamentally the agent. The broker has the duties to supervise all the activities occurring under their license. It's a huge deal to be a broker. I understand the stress, but it's really important that everyone remembers that the broker is fundamentally the center of and the foundation of the real estate law. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so one of the questions we got in advance was, can you make your website more easy to use? Yes, we can. We are working on that. I like to say that we have a lot of great information on our website, but we have a lot of great information on our website. It can be hard to find. We have a lot of information just starting from our homepage, how to look up a license, how to contact us easily if you have a licensing question. So my best advice is to use that little search function at the top right-hand side of the page, type in your inquiry or type in some keywords, and you should be able to find what you need. Next slide, please. Publications. My favorite book, and I know this is Trisha's favorite book too, is the real estate book, the real estate law book. I was asked in advance if we have a glossary of terms. Yes, we do. It's the law book. You go to the law, you look for broker, you look for the definition of a branch manager. It's all in the law book, and it's easiest to go right to the source, which is the real estate law book. We've got our broker evaluation, self-evaluation guidelines and compliance manuals, but the real estate advertising guidelines is another one that I'd like to highlight for you, because we got quite a few questions having to do with, how do I put my, where do I need to put my license number, Joe? Just kidding. Joe, where do we need to put my license number? Why? When does it become a point where it's an advertisement versus something else? So all of those kinds of things are covered in our real estate advertising guidelines. It is a very lengthy, very thorough guide on the key points of the law, first point of contact solicitation materials, team names, advertising, all that kind of stuff. In addition to that, though, we did get one question in advance that had to do with former names. So this one I know for sure is not in the advertising guidelines. We're working on updating that. But there was a law that was enacted last year or 2 years ago that says that if you were licensed under your legal name, and then you change your legal name and you get your license, you notify DRE, then you can continue to use your former name as long as it shows up on the DRE website. So, for example, if I changed my name from Chica Sundquist to Chica Smith, I'm currently licensed under Chica Sundquist, and then that's going to show up as a former name because my new legal name and my new license name is going to be Chica Smith. But I've got a lot of advertising out there that goes by Chica Sundquist. So as long as both of those have been, submitted to DRE, it's going to show up on your license information, and you can use both or any former name that you had notified us of. So that was a question I got in advance. Next slide, please. Complaint resolution and facilitation. This is a great program that we don't brag about enough at DRE. As you saw earlier, we get a lot of complaints, and then, a smaller percentage of that actually got investigated, because so many complaints we found just had to do with a consumer not understanding something in a transaction or losing connection with their salesperson for some strange reason. And it just had to do with a breakdown in communication. And it was taking us a long time to investigate something that didn't really need to get investigated. And it was taking consumers through a process where they just needed an immediate response, an immediate connection. And so that's where we found an opportunity at DRE to just be that facilitator, to connect the consumer with the licensee, or to connect a licensee with another licensee and move that transaction forward. It resolves complaints quickly, usually within 10 days. It's informal. The complaint goes away. We don't need to do an investigation. And we really find it a really good opportunity to just strengthen a relationship that maybe got a little bit cracked or a little bit broken during a transaction. So we have complaint facilitators in each office. That's their primary role, is to just help facilitate communication and resolve complaints quickly. Next slide, please. Another resource that we don't often talk about enough, I'll say, is our consumer recovery account. So as I mentioned earlier, sometimes our consumers can fall victim to fraud. And if they sue a licensee and win a fraud judgment, or if they are successful in getting a criminal restitution order against a licensee, and that licensee can't pay the civil judgment or can't pay the criminal restitution order, then they can come to us, DRE, as a fund of last resort, where they apply to us, let us know what happened, and then we may be able to kind of provide them that recompense for what they've lost. It's up to a certain dollar amount. It's not high. I think it's like $25,000. If I'm wrong, I apologize, but it's a limited amount, but at least it's something. So if you have a consumer that you're aware of that has those issues, please let them know that we have a consumer recovery account. It's a fund of last resort. We've also got on our webpage all the amazing publications and guides I've talked about. We're doing podcasts now. It's very exciting. And then we've got consumer and licensee videos. We're trying to provide those in multiple languages as well to increase our access and consumer access to us and to our resources. Next slide, please. I'm losing time, so I'm going to talk a little more quickly. Legislation. So I know I'm getting questions on our role in the settlement and practice changes, and then also our role in kind of legislation that's in the pipeline. So just quickly, DRE, we don't have a role in the legislative process, meaning we don't introduce bills, we don't, approve bills. That's all done with the legislature. But if there is a bill that's going through the process, like AB 2992, then we'll monitor it, look for status, and then occasionally we'll provide technical assistance to the author to say things like, hey, it looks like you're trying to do this in the bill. Here's what the real estate law does or could do. Here's where you may want to, rephrase something a little bit more to get to your intent, because this is what our licensees do. So we do provide that technical assistance to the author's office. And then clearly, if the governor approves and signs off on the legislation, then we will implement the bill and enforce the real estate law if that's appropriate. Next slide, please. So some legislation that's been signed already that I can share and talk to you about that affects licensees. A couple of them have to do with disclosures, and then some landlord-tenant bills as well. So water tank disclosures, you might find that your client has gotten a water tank from a nonprofit or the state water resource control board, and that tank doesn't go with them. It doesn't sell with the property. And so there needs to be that proper disclosure to the new buyer that the water tank doesn't go with the property. Electrical systems, we've got amazing new homes in California, but we've got a lot of older homes too, where, electrical wiring doesn't necessarily keep up or doesn't have the ability to take on more electrical systems like solar. So that's a requirement for a disclosure to ensure that buyers are aware of that potential if they want to add solar to an older home, that they need to have an inspection by an electrician, or sorry, a professional who's capable of those kinds of inspections. SB 1051 has to do with landlords ensuring that they are paying for changing locks for victims of domestic violence. AB 2114, this just added, let's see, previously only structural engineers and architects could inspect balconies or other exterior elevated elements of a building, but SB 2114 adds civil engineers to be allowed to be able to do those inspections. Okay, perfect, thank you. Okay, so buyer practice changes is what I'll call this. This is kind of where I'd like to open it up for Q&A as well, because I wanted to first kind of provide our role in what's happening right now. And then I wanted to ask what you're seeing, if you can provide kind of some of what you're seeing in the Q&A. But our role in the practice changes because we are a state regulatory agency that only enforces the real estate law. We are doing probably what majority of you are doing is we're monitoring to see what's happening. What are the practice changes? We're monitoring that legislation I talked about, which if it goes through as is, then we may have, we likely have an implementation role, but we're monitoring the legislation. And right now we're working on education to consumers and licensees, because believe it or not, some licensees don't even know about the practice changes. They don't know there's been lawsuits. They don't know about any of that. So we're working on some education and on that component. And then clearly, we're watching out for any complaints related to practice changes. Right now, we're not seeing any. We're not getting a ton of inquiries from consumers and licensees about practice changes. So what that tells me is that industry is doing a great job of providing that education, talking to clients about what the practice changes are, and helping to maneuver and guide them through the practice changes. So just FYI, again, we're in a monitoring phase. If the legislation goes through, then we'll do another round of education on implementation and the role that DRE is going to play. But for right now, we're working on education on practice changes, but not necessarily stepping in to say, hey, the settlement says this, so now you need to do this. No, that's not our role. We're not shopping MLSs, and we're not shopping brokers. What is it called? Surprise inspections or something. We're not doing that because we don't have a direct role in the settlement and those practice changes, more of an education approach, and then monitoring for complaints and such. I'm going to ask Craig to leave this slide up as we kind of go through Q&A. So these are ways to reach out to us. We were joking earlier about, our Mastodon account. I have to admit, I don't know. I've never accessed our Mastodon account. But find us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, X. And then, if you have licensing or exam questions, you can go to our online web form and submit those to us. So now I'd like to flip it to Q&A. I know we've got some questions in the Q&A. Okay. Let's see, answer live. So we had one related to, so it sounds like a few years ago, we had our leadership kind of provide some updates on the wire fraud scams that I know are still happening, and kind of the concern that it's easy to take, chica.sunquist at, generalmail.com. I don't know if that exists. Chica.sunquist at generalmail.com, and change that to create a fake account that says chica.sunquist real estate agent at generalemail.com. And so I think we were providing kind of maybe best practices or alerts to licensees to say, hey, maybe just use a brokerage account that might be safer. Maybe stay away from those general email.com kind of internet or email providers, so that somebody doesn't just come in and try to steal your email address. That happens with websites too. www.abcbank.com can be changed to www.abcbank.org. even though it's not a true nonprofit. And then consumers are led to that fake website and put in their personal information. So it sounds like we were just kind of alerting licensees to that. Free email accounts are acceptable. We don't discipline somebody for using a free email account, but just be aware that I think that can potentially cause issues. Make sure that your clients are connected to you regularly, that they know you're current and proper contact information. It can even happen with a phone number. You know, you can create a phone number that's not tied to you. Scammers do that all the time. So just stay in connection with your clients, with, you know, the escrow officer, everybody, to make sure that, you know, everybody knows your current contact information and not to use something else or new. But yes, no, we're not, we would probably encourage, you know, secure broker emails, but we're not going to discipline you for using a free account. I hope that helps. Let's see. Okay. How often do you update the license test and what criteria do you use? Great question, Anna. So, and congratulations. Look forward to working with you next year. Sorry, Joe, I know we've just met and I would have looked forward to working with you more. Yes, Anna, so we do a regular update of our exam every 5 to 7 years. That's industry standard for a licensing exam. And we're in the middle of one right now. We are at the phase where they are, I believe, writing exam questions. So what we do is we contract with an outside neutral exam provider, someone that's an expert in this, and then we bring in subject matter experts from the industry to help us evaluate current practices, to make sure we're testing for what's current, to make sure that our answers and questions are correct, and then write new questions and then evaluate those. So it's a very lengthy, very detailed process. We hope to be done with that for this round, I think by the end of this year, this calendar year. So by next year, we should have incorporated some new questions that are based in newer practices, maybe more for housing related questions, you know, just to make sure that we're updated with what's current in the industry. But we are using not internal staff, but I mean, our internal staff help guide, obviously, but we use experts from the industry, licensed professionals, you all that know what you're doing, that are boots on the ground, that have information on current practices. Okay.
That's great. I think Anna asked that because she's actually memorized all the questions from 20 years ago, and she's wondering if she's going to get to use those again. So you're gonna enjoy working with her next year.
I wouldn't rely on that, Anna.
So I'm now speaking maybe to any of the attendees. I think you put out a great question to us, kind of see kind of what's going on out there. So if anybody wants to chime in the last couple of minutes, I think that'd be great. I think you did such a fabulous job in laying out what DRE does, you know, and 433,000 licensees out there. I can't imagine the percentage that gets CAR mixed up with DRE, that gets mixed up with NAR, that gets mixed up with the local association and what those roles are. And frankly, I understand why. We have a lot of irons in the skillet. We have a lot of things going on with our industry and oversight. So I appreciate you laying that out for us and your role and potential role in what we call just under the umbrella of settlement. But that settlement will, as we understand, will be working its way into state law on AB 2992, which for our viewers is the formalization of the written agreement between buyer and broker, and currently called the BRBC. So as that comes forth, you'll be able to talk more about that. But at this point, you know, the settlement is fairly new to you as it is to us. And if anybody has anything they want to chime in on, that would be great. You've answered so many of our questions on here. I really appreciate that. As we wait for if anything comes in or any of these questions, what's kind of, and maybe even Tricia sees this, what are some of the pitfalls that we need to be looking out for? What are some of those things that we really see as, you know, that we can fall prey to even with our best intentions?
Tricia, if anything comes to mind really quickly, please jump in. Some of the pitfalls.
I know sometimes it's with our putting our license number on our social media, or how much is that, you know, getting are you seeing, or something, things that we kind of just otherwise forget in a busy world.
I would just give one suggestion, and Chika mentioned it as one of maybe a more common area that we see in our transactions, is really to just make sure that you're acting in the best interest of your client and you're disclosing all known material facts in a transaction. I do think we see a lot of complaints within that area where possibly a buyer or seller could have felt something could have been more fully disclosed. So I would just really take advantage of those forms when you're doing this, working with the seller, help guide them on really what is in their obligation to disclose to a buyer. So that would probably be one of my biggest recommendations.
Okay, thank you. And
if I may add to that, Joe, Trisha, that's perfect, because you're right. That is, we need our agents to show their value, right? We want someone to show why they're earning the commission that they're earning. And so we don't want our licensees to just send a bunch of paperwork to a client and say, here, sign it. Or with technology nowadays, they just skip to the parts that they need to sign, but then you're not showing your value as a licensee. So, to exactly what Trisha said, explain what they're signing, walk them through the documents, show your value as a licensed professional.
thank you for that. And document that you showed your value as a licensed professional. I don't want to keep harping on the settlement, but staying away from the change, what still is occurring, and I think this is a good separation. The change that we go through, let's say with the buyer representation, is going to bring back awareness to agency, and agency is state law, and dual agency is state law, unrepresented agency, or working with an unrepresented buyer. All these things are highlighting laws that do exist. So when we, say, well, could there be a secret shopper? And I appreciate you don't have secret shoppers, but our risk may lie in that we are not acting in full disclosure as we provide information, could be ostensibly seen as dual agency or not. So that is something you still do monitor, though not through secret, but that's still an important element to the DRE, is how we handle our agency currently, correct? And if you want to talk on that.
I know probably dual agency is probably the most sticky topic, in addition to, oops, I now think I'm your agent. So both of those, you're over agent and then you're under agent. With dual agency, that's been around for a long time, so I don't think I need to necessarily get into details on that. But the oops, I think I'm your agent now. What we focus on, and this is specifically laid out in the real estate law, is something that we would potentially discipline someone for, is when you're acting as an agent without they're both dual agent without both parties' knowledge and consent. So, you're right. You can accidentally step into the, oops, I did something where I think I may need be your agent now, but then have that discussion like, okay, here are the things, or do you want to be my sales, or have those discussions with your client. So they are consenting to the agency as well, that they have knowledge of what the expectations are now that you've become their agent. But I definitely understand the struggle of, where is that line? At one point, am I being helpful to the seller where I'm trying to sell the property? What point am I trying to solicit this person to still work with me? I think those kinds of practices are going to work themselves out as we kind of settle into these practice changes. But just be aware, we at DRE, we like to think we're pretty reasonable when it comes to our investigations. So we try to take that education approach first, that compliance approach first. If it's a oops situation, was there consumer harm? was there negligence? We take kind of a spectrum approach to our investigations. But yeah, I just know that we understand it's difficult too. And so we're not very black and white when it comes to our investigations. There are very case specific elements that we will consider when we're looking at a violation or an alleged violation of real estate law.
And you have, as mentioned previously, you have marketing guidelines that you have out, and somebody can search those on dre.ca.gov.
Just type in real estate advertising guidelines and it should show up in the search box. I know you can go to publications and then scroll down to licensee publications and all that fun stuff, but it's probably just easier to type real estate advertising guidelines in the search box.
Great. And I think this is final because we're right at 11 o'clock. And really quickly, if you look at all the complaints, how many percentage come from consumers, buyers, sellers? Where's our risk point, would you say, with that? And I don't know if that's even.
I don't know if we track that information.
Okay.
Trisha, do you mind?
I don't have a specific number, but I would say that a majority of our complaints do come from the consumers.
Consumers.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. That was what I expected to be. Very informative and enlightening and not scary at all. I think
We're not scary people, Joe. Yeah.
You're not scary. I was so afraid, like, oh, these are scary people, the DRE, but no, you're great. You're actually lovely people. So thank you so much for being here and doing this. And I'm gonna let Romeo close and say a few extra things here, but I want to thank you and nice to get to know you. If we can converse and do anything for the remainder of my term, I'd love to. And then from there on, I will just be another one of your agents out in the field, which I am anyway. But thank you both for being here. Romeo, did you want to close with some final parting shots?
Yes, just a couple of announcements for our members. First off, Chica, thank you so much. We're thrilled. Like I'm just so amazed that the head of the entire state's licensing agency would have time to educate us. And I have to tell you that even though we prepared for this presentation and I knew what questions you were going to handle, I still learned some stuff. And I really, really appreciate that. Not only do you have the experience with the state, but that we're actually a licensed agent. So I tell people all of the time that as the association executive, I speak real estate as a second language, but that's your first language. So I appreciate that. Also, just kind of wanted to remind everybody that we will be sending out a recap and try to share all of the links that we mentioned. Something did come up that I feel like I want to mention, and with my Realtor Association hat on, I just want to remind our members that as a member of the Marin Association of Realtors, you have access to the CAR and NAR benefits. And one of those CAR benefits is the 45 hours of free licensing courses that you can take. And I know that Joe and Anna and several of our volunteers go to the CAR meetings where they have an army of volunteers make sure that all of those courses are up to date and follow the current laws. So if you take that free 45-hour coursework, you'll be covered for the DRE law. And my favorite part about it is that you don't have to take all of it. You may just need one course and you just take that one course. And it is at a very accessible price. And I'm very glad to offer that to you for free. And so hope to see you guys at Bocce. Hope to see you at the school tours, which I have to tell you is one of the coolest things that we do. We're working on an additional speaker series. But thank you guys. And the next time we have the big meeting we're working on, we hope to see you in January to support 2025 president, Anna Frost. So thank you guys so much. Thank you, Joe. And it's 11:04 and we're signing off. Thank you so much.